Hugo, Hiccup, and the Floating Flower. In the heart of Pumpernickel Town stood the Balloon Bakery, a shop where the bread was as light as a cloud. Hugo Hiccup worked there every morning. He wore a chef hat so tall and so white that it wobbled whenever he walked. Hugo loved the smell of warm cinnamon and the sound of crusty rolls, but most of all, he loved to help. Today, Hugo wanted to surprise his father Remy by making a batch of bouncy buns all by himself. "I know exactly what to do," Hugo whispered to his hat. He gathered the flour, the sugar, and the secret ingredient, yeast. In the Balloon Bakery, yeast was what made the bread grow big and strong. Hugo was in a bit of a hurry. Instead of using the tiny silver spoon, he picked up the whole jar. More yeast means more bounce, he thought. Glug, glug, glug. The yeast tumbled into the bowl like a snowy waterfall. Hugo stirred the dough round and round until it was smooth and stretchy. Suddenly, the dough began to wiggle. Then it began to wobble. Pop! A giant bubble formed, and the dough started to grow. It grew larger than a pumpkin, then larger than a pig, and finally, larger than Hugo himself. It was the fluffiest, roundest ball of dough the bakery had ever seen. With a gentle whoosh, the dough lifted off the table. It drifted higher and higher, floating through the air like a giant golden balloon. Hugo jumped and reached for it, but his fingers only brushed the bottom. The dough floated all the way up to the ceiling and got stuck right behind a wooden beam. Just then, the door creaked open and Remy walked in. Hugo's heart went thump-thump against his apron. He thought about hiding under the table or blaming a gust of wind. But then he looked at his father's kind eyes and decided to be brave. "Papa, I was in a hurry and I used too much yeast," Hugo confessed quietly. Remy didn't look angry. He looked proud that Hugo told the truth. "Honesty is the best ingredient in any kitchen, Hugo," Remy said with a smile. "Mistakes happen when we rush, but we can fix them together. We just need to be very diligent and very careful." Remy brought out a very long wooden ladder. "You hold the bottom steady, Hugo. That is a very important job," Remy instructed. Hugo gripped the ladder with all his might, making sure it didn't wobble an inch. He watched carefully as his father climbed up toward the giant floating dough. Together, they managed to pull the dough down and divide it into many small, perfect pieces. This time, Hugo used the tiny silver spoon to measure. He watched the numbers on the scale and checked the timer. He was being diligent, making sure everything was just right. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the bakery was filled with the most wonderful smell. The bouncy buns were golden, delicious, and, most importantly, they stayed right on the tray. Hugo took a big bite and smiled. He had learned that a little bit of patience makes everything taste much better.